with all of that, I'm going to introduce our guest today, Gib Biddle, former VP of product at Netflix, former product leader at Chegg. Really today, he speaks all over the place. I mean, I think you give Gib, like 250 talks a year or a month. Maybe it's 250 a month.
Like 140
I don't know.
A year.
But who's counting? No, in all seriousness, Gib's a superstar, and we're really fortunate to be friends with Gib and have him for this. We have two other friends with us too. I'm going to first turn it over to Gib, and I'll let Gib introduce our other friends, Danny and Sega.
Yeah, I'm all good. Danny is from Cleveland and in InsurTech, FinTech. You want to say hi, Danny?
Sure. Hey, everybody. So yeah, I'm, as Gib and Mike both said, I'm from Cleveland, and I met Mike just in the Cleveland area, and that's how we became connected. I've seen Gib speak several times, and I try to never miss a Gib talk if I can help it. But yeah, as Gib said, my last space was in the InsurTech industry. I'm a product manager in Cleveland, and right now for the last year, I have been a stay-at-home mom and online kindergarten teacher to my 5-year-old, which has been a very challenging journey. I'll call it that.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here today. Sega and Danny are here to sort of help out and really bring the audience on stage, if you will. Sega, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sega Dinka. Dialing in from Los Angeles. I'm currently the VP of product at Dollar Shave Club. Started my career in UX and shifted into product halfway through. So I've been doing product for about 10 years. Have seen Gib speak a few times. I subscribe to the newsletter. I share it and tell everyone about it. So I'd recommend that you do as well.
Cool. Let's do it. So today I'm going to talk about the fact that inventing the future is hard. And there's really 3 chapters to this story. The first, we're going to talk about Mars, of all things. And then we're going to talk about Netflix. And then I'm going to bring it home and talking about, your rocket ships. So I just want you to imagine that today you started your very new job. And your new job is simple and huge at the same time. The job is to colonize Mars, to put humans on Mars and help them to develop as a species and live there for generations. This is from the series on Netflix. I think it's called Home. It's all about Mars, which is cool. So I'm going to start with a question of everyone using Slido. And the question is, what year will the first human land on Mars? This is the question I have for you. Danny, can you do the quick pep talk for folks who haven't used Slido yet?
Yep. So if you're just joining us and you haven't joined Slido, open your camera app on your mobile device and scan or hold it up to the QR code. It'll automatically recognize it and scan it and provide you with a link. Is the prompt to say where you're from still up there, or will it go directly to?
No, this is all we need right now is everybody's estimate on what year will the first human land on Mars. Sega, what would your response be for this one?
I put 2040.
2040. Okay, so what do you think about the collective wisdom of the peeps here, Sega?
I'm surprised.
Which way?
And I'm surprised that 2030 is in the lead.
Yeah.
From what I'm seeing and hearing, even going back to the moon, it's still like a talk at this point. So it makes me wonder.
This is an enthusiastic crowd.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, so the key thing here is imagine that this is your job and this is your company, and you have this wide variation in thinking about whether it's possible, it's feasible, and how do you get everyone aligned and actually making this happen. And I have a second question for everybody. What will be, as the product manager for colonizing Mars, what do you think will be your greatest challenge? And I've given you 5 choices here.
Look at that.
Yeah, we're doing pretty well in the Slido shaming department, Mike, huh?
Where we have almost over half of the attendees have
awesome.
responded. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And
Danny,
interesting that one of the answers is everybody stayed away from it.
Yeah. Danny, which way did you go with this one?
So what I'm thinking here is probably the food, water, and oxygen, just for the sheer amount of time it takes to get to Mars. So you'd have to plan for the time it takes to get, the time it takes to get back, and then also the time you're there. So there's a lot of space, I would think, that would take up just on a ship or whatever it is to get you to and from, right? So I think that would be a challenge. And then that would lead a challenge to launching and landing, returning, and living in those conditions, funding. So they all kind of relate to each other.
Got it. Yeah, I could see Kalpana Elon Musk. Sega, what do you think Elon Musk would focus on here?
I think returning.
He's a daredevil. I saw another comment that said not coming back.
Well, that's true.
Okay, what's the big challenge for you, Sega?
I think it's returning, because just the sheer amount of energy it takes to get there is already something that we're trying to figure out. So to be able to have similar amounts to come back, I think it's going to be a one-way flight.
Yeah, I see Justin Fowler saying it's a one-way ticket. Just for me personally, this would be I'd probably focus on the funding. How do you economically enable this? And Elon Musk tends to think that way as well. So I just really tried to help you understand how overwhelmingly challenging this job would be. And then this huge diversity of thought. And a lot of my, my thinking comes from watching The Martian. I don't know if you remember the moment where Matt Damon is on the planet, this huge explosion, and he says, I've got to grow 4 years of food on a planet that doesn't have any soil. And then his response, I'm going to science the shit out of this. Okay? And in fact, that has to happen in a project like this as well. So what I'm really talking about today is this series of decisions about people, product, and the business that you as a product leader need to make and inventing the future. And I'm always looking at these three forces, if you will. One of consumer science, and that's the experimentation. That's the science the shit out of stuff. And then there's the strategy, and that's the plan. I'm going to talk a lot about today developing a long-term product vision or plan. And then the third thing, because great companies don't have the same teams and people for the whole journey. They tend to need different people at different stages. It's actually culture that kind of becomes the collective judgment of an organization. It's, in fact, judgment helps people to make great decisions about people, product, and the business, sometimes without even talking to each other. So I'm always trying to align these three forces, if you will. So I'm just going to outline my product vision for colonizing Mars, if this were my job. And I'm using something that I call the GLEe model that I'll introduce to you in a moment. So for me, the first stage, and you can see evidence of this with Elon Musk, the first stage is to get big on reusable rockets. It turns out that makes it much more cost effective to get out of the Earth orbit, which is really the hardest part of all of this. And then a next step is to lead in this concept of in-orbit refueling. How do you store fuel in space? Once a device is outside of that Earth's atmosphere, now it's much easier to do your journey to anywhere. And then the next part of this, and you can think of each of these stages as 5 or 10 years, and I'm really putting out a long-term product vision. Next stage would be to expand into Mars-based transport and supply partnerships. And this acknowledges that in the long term, if you're really, truly trying to dent the universe, which is happening here, you can't do it alone. So you find yourself engaging with lots of other companies to make things happen. And then a fourth step is to expand even further via Space Construction Consortium. That's how you can actually build these housings, if you will, on Mars. Now you'll notice that every one of these words, it spells GLEe, GLEe on the right, and I'll share with you that model in a second. Now, why the heck, in talking about product and product vision and all these things, that I start with Mars? It's because inventing the future requires a bunch of different things. You need to have a fuzzy vision of the future, a way to keep people sort of nominally pointed in the right direction. And you need to have a long-term strategy for how you might get there, a plan. You need constant experimentation because your plans won't all be right. In fact, more than half of your hypotheses will be wrong. And you need to experiment with lots of different stuff. And the last is you need a culture of iconoclasts. That in fact, the early people that helped you get from here to there won't be the right people to get you from here to the next step. And if you want to think about what iconoclasts are, you know, if you're a parent of a 13, 14, or 15-year-old kid, they're constantly challenging, always telling you you're an idiot, constantly asking why. That's part of what it is to create a culture of iconoclasts. Mike briefly introduced me. I was the VP of product at Netflix starting in 2005, and then I went on to my next startup, which is Chegg, which is a textbook rental and homework help company. So I want to talk about some of this stuff in the context of Netflix. I want to talk about what the Netflix product vision looked like and how it's so hard to get these three forces of the consumer science, the experimentation, of strategy, that plan, and then culture. Is everything good, Mike?
Yeah, everything's great.
Cool. So the initial vision for Netflix, that's Reed Hastings on the left, that's Mark Randolph in the morning, in the middle. This is pretty simple. In 1998, you know, they acknowledged that this was not always going to be a DVD by mail company. And that's how the company started. It's when the DVD player was born in 1997, these little round discs you could send back and forth in the mail. But at that stage, they just said, this is the warm-up act. It's Netflix, not DVD flicks. And their plan in 1998, which now feels ridiculous because it was wrong, but it's hard to predict the future, will launch downloading. That's what they called it then. There was no word like streaming in the year 2000. Now, in point of fact, we didn't launch streaming till January of 2007, right? So this is just hard to do. So I'm going to tell you or share with you the product vision. So this is me talking in the year 2005. First thing we're going to do is get big on DVDs. That'll help us find this initial audience. And then we're going to lead streaming. And we really couldn't guess when it would happen. As it turned out, in 2007, January, the internet bandwidth was fast enough. And we just barely had enough money to begin to get the rights for digital, for movies. And then once the company was a digital company, and we didn't have to worry about doing integration with postal services all over the world, then we could expand worldwide. And that began to happen around 2009, 2010. And then most of you are seeing the evidence of the fourth stage, if you will, of this journey, which is to extend even further the original. So you can think about each of these steps in the GLEe model as a phase of growth that will get you from here to here to here and finally to there. And by the way, this never ends. You know, start thinking about what's the next chapter, if you will, for Netflix. And we'll talk about that later. So this is just an important idea. Every successful company rides the growth wave until it crests and falls. The secret is to create the next growth wave before the first one collapses. This was a financial analyst for Yahoo. At the end of the day, Yahoo got good at search, but then there was nothing next for them. And that's one of the key reasons why they don't exist. And you can think of these waves, for instance, for Netflix, the DVD player coming out was its first wave. The growth of internet video was its second, and that continues. And when you ride these waves, it's a lot easier than swimming without a wave or surfing without a wave. All right, and the idea with this GLEe model is encouraging people to engage in long-term thinking, because in the long term, anything is possible. And I'll share this for Netflix. 1997, of course, one DVD by mail. That's how it started. It was actually an audio CD. They were just testing to see if it could go through the mail system without breaking a disc. 2007, a streaming launch. By 2015, Netflix is in 190 countries. You can see how this vision is coming to life. And then just a couple of weeks ago, Netflix got 35 Oscar nominations. It's amazing. Think about a punk DVD by mail company growing into the leader in movie creation. That was Netflix got the most nominations. We'll see who the winners are in a couple of months. They affect, it used to be that HBO was the leader in original content. Now Netflix is clearly the leader in original content. And this is just a tribute to the step-by-step approach and taking the long-term view. Now I'm going to show you what the journey really looks like, because nothing about creating the future is clean and simple. So I just want to share how messy and how winding and twisty and curvy the road truly is. So I said, hey, starts as a DVD by mail company. And then the company was actually doing a la carte, which meant for like $6 or $7, you'd have one DVD in the mail. It came like 5 or 6 days later. It sucked. I mean, all startups suck at the beginning. And then they bet the company on the all-you-can-eat subscription. They said you could have 3 DVDs sitting on top of your TV at a time. It started at like $22 a month. And that all-you-can-eat thing worked. And that was a pretty big business model experiment. By the way, Netflix was a DVD by mail company, and it chose to extend into the UK with a DVD by mail service. They spent a year integrating with the Postal Service, and a week before the launch, this is in 2005, they canceled it. They realized, well, what are we doing? We're getting ahead of ourselves. It's way too hard to go worldwide with a DVD by mail service. That was messy. That was dirty. And then, believe it or not, Netflix experimented with original content in the DVD era. They had something called Red Envelope Studios, and it was a failure. And then there it is, the launch of streaming, of downloading. It was called Watch Instantly. We had 300 it was called, our customers called it steamy romance titles. That was sort of code for something else. And then by 2010, that was the first time Netflix launched into a different country, and that was into Canada. And then Max. Max was this theory that a more entertaining experience, you'd come to the PlayStation, this TV-based system, and Max would start talking to you and helping you find great movies you love. And it was this really fun and funny and entertaining experience that failed. That's another year of effort. And then most of you, I'm guessing, you can tell me in the chat, has everybody watched House of Cards? I just need a yes or no. That was a success. That was 2013, really the beginning. This is a huge failure. Netflix was now a big streaming company. They had 10 million people in the world getting DVDs by mail, and they said, we're going to separate these two services. We're going to create Quickster for the DVD people, and then everybody else can have Netflix. And just announcing that plan, not even executing it, caused Netflix to lose 800,000 customers in a quarter. The market cap of the company went from $40 billion to $10 billion in a quarter. I mean, a huge disaster. And then House of Cards was killed in 2018. Kevin Spacey was implicated in sexual harassment of a young boy. And that decision was made in 20 minutes by Cindy Holland, who decided that it was against the values of Netflix. She used the Netflix culture to make a decision independently to kill a TV series because of this sexual harassment. Just, mind-boggling the speed with which the company made the decision. And then last year, there were 160 Emmy nominations, and we'll see how it goes with the Oscars this year. So I talked, and I think about Netflix as basically a multi-stage rocket. Stage 1 is DVDs, then stage 2 is streaming, and then 3 is worldwide, and 4 is original content. And just like colonizing Mars. And along the way, you're building this core competency that you hope will apply to all 4 or 5 or 6 stages of the journey. All right, and then I want to share with you just some of the key insights about the product strategy. And I'm going to make us look smart. I'm just going to tell you the theories and hypotheses that were helpful. along the way. And this is, more than just the product vision. This is the plan about what were the kinds of things we should focus on. And our job, the way we thought of it simply, was to delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And we learned over time that the simpler and easier we made the experience, the more we improved retention. In the old days, Netflix at start, like 10% of its members canceled every month. And today, 2% cancel every month. So dramatically improved. And this was one of the theories and hypotheses, the product strategies that worked. Personalization is another. If you could do a better job of bringing the stuff that you wanted to your home screen on your TV or your device or the PC, that would create a better experience. And in the DVD era, we learned that the faster you can get a DVD the next day in the mail, like 92% of our customers got the DVD the next day in the mail, that improved retention. And of course, hitting the button and just watching a movie instantly, that improved retention. And we also learned the importance of building out a device ecosystem so that customers could watch movies anytime, anywhere, on any type of screen all over the world. And there was just one last idea. In the early days, probably up till about 2008, 2009, we really struggled to make the business model work. So we were explicit in talking about margin enhancement. And that just means figure out ways to generate profits so you can invest more money in building an even better product in the future. So all 5 of these things, what they had in common is they delighted customers. They built hard to copy advantage so people couldn't compete with us as effectively. And it helped to improve the business. So this is the product strategy. I'm sharing it with you because what I'm going to do in a moment is put you in the hot seat at these key moments and times for Netflix. You're going to be the head of product, and I want you to look at this list of stuff. And based on what you've learned about the long-term product vision, about these key strategies, what ideas are you going to choose to focus on or not? And of course, you have the benefit of hindsight. That should make it easier. But I think you're going to realize that it's actually quite hard. So I have these 2 pop quizzes from 2 moments in time. And I'm just going to set the stage for this first pop quiz. It's 2005. It's early days. You're a DVD by mail company. And you've got this growing DVD by mail library. It's going from 20,000 to 100,000. And the service costs about $22 a month for 3 DVDs at a time. And those damn bastards from Blockbuster have launched this program called Total Access. So they've actually copied Netflix's service, this DVD by mail service. And they've also said, gosh, you can exchange, you can take your DVD, bring it into Blockbuster, and you can trade it for the next one. You don't even need to wait for it to go back and forth in the mail. And this was like an existential threat for Netflix. And at this point in time, this is the key metric, retention, 5% of our customers were canceling each month. 95% were staying. And this is the high level engagement metric. This is the job of a product leader to improve retention. But my point here is the company is unprofitable. It's not clear how it's going to actually make a business model that works. Now, Netflix is a bit of an idea factory. And so here are all the ideas at this moment in time that folks are advocating. And I want you to pretend that you're the product leader in 2005. And I want you to tell me which 2 or 3 projects on this list would you choose to focus on in order to improve retention? And I want to see what the collective wisdom is. And of course, I'll share with you some learnings after the fact. Mike, you want to remind peeps how to do Slido for anybody who wasn't with us early?
Sure. You could scroll up in the chat. Probably you'll see a link to it there. But the easy way is if you have your mobile device in your hand, you probably do. I always have this attached to my hand. Just open up the camera app and hover over the QR code, and a link should pop up. You just click on it, and that'll take you right to this poll. I see many of you have answered already. We got, say, 21 answers, but hopefully we hear from a lot more of you. There's definitely more coming in. So And we got, couple popular choices so far, Gib.
Sega, which way do you go on this? I mean, you imagining what it is to be a head of product, that's not hard for you, correct?
Not too hard.
Hey,
I
what do you
went
go
with
with?
a couple.
What do you
So
prioritize?
Top of the list was speeding up the delivery. But I've also picked lower price plans and the social piece, getting your friends in.
Cool. Tell me more about your thinking on social.
If the hypothesis is that if your friends are there and you have some kind of a social circle and network there, that will give the service a little more stickiness, a little more reason for you to stick around versus just the transactional nature of getting DVDs.
That's awesome. So what Sega's just said is, if you're trying to delight customers in these hard to copy margin enhancing ways, if you can build a social network where you're connected to all of your friends, that'll give you a reason not to leave the service. That is a hard to copy network effect, right? It's cool. Okay, Danny, where do you go on this one?
So I chose speed up DVD by mail and launch original content. I was thinking kind of in the time frame of 2005. Now you think about overnight shipping, Prime, 2 days, everything, that's kind of table stakes for everything, right? But back in 2005, if you would have sped up the delivery by mail, it would have been a little bit more of a delight feature, because it's not something that every company was doing. And then original content I chose because, again, it would have been a new thing. It would have been like a first to market thing, because in 2005 you had there was HBO and that, but it really wasn't a lot of original content. So it would have been something new and different.
Cool. Sharada, when I say personalization, personalized merchandising means Netflix tries to get to know your movie tastes and all the data around movies, and then magically connect the two. So the goal state, if you're on Apple TV, for instance, that the first 10 boxes that show up on the home screen, that you're going to choose one of those because it's just personalized. It doesn't make you dig in the dirt to try to find a movie you love. Okay, so let me hit the high points here. So with perfect hindsight, and there'll be a couple of surprises for folks. Absolutely. The next year or two, all we did was focus on getting people the DVDs in the mail the next day. So our proxy metric was the percentage of folks that got the disc they wanted at the top of their list the next day in the mail. We started that, it was like 60% of the time they got the disc the next day, and we pushed it all the way up to like 92%. And that was by extending the number of hubs. That improved retention. And then absolutely, the lower price plans, we were sort of freaks. We were LA movie buffs. Now I'm representing Sega, who's in LA, and then Silicon Valley freaks who, just figure out how to use these complicated services. I'm one of them. But who all those freaks loved getting 3 DVDs to choose from, but it turns out the rest of the world simply wanted more value, a $10 plan where you could only get 1 disc at a time. Those first 2 ideas were really hot. Now I'm going to surprise you because they worked, successful experiments. Turns out we invested in doing advertising on the site, big banners, and we let our customers buy used discs. And circa 2006, 2007, we developed 40 million in operating income in a year. Half was from ads and half was from previously viewed discs. So that was a very successful experiment. The personalization, that was a long-term play. It was part of everything we did for every year of our lives. It was strategically important. And then Sega, I was totally bummed. But we experimented with social in the context of movies, and it failed. It's failed a lot at Netflix. And my 2 consumer insights for you. The first is that your friends have sucky movie tastes, okay? And we thought we could solve that through algorithms. We couldn't. And then the second is you don't want your friends to know what you're watching all the time. So I was binge watching Cake Boss last night, right? I'm not that proud of it, okay? And then Danny, by the way, you guys were awesome on the first 2 for both of you. The launching original content, we were surprised at that in the era of DVD by mail, that failed. That was the Red Envelope Studios. But of course, when the world changed to streaming and episodic TV content, at that point, Netflix made a wise investment of $100 million in House of Cards, for instance. You might have noticed that the whole company, the sort of locus of content shifted from movies to TVs because people love to binge watch. Anyways, you can see how hard the job is. And the job is hard, correct, Sega?
Very hard.
So here's what I hope you'll learn. First, what we were discovering was the core, you know, at the top of the rocket ship is the capsule. At the core of our service, we were about selection, lots of movies, value, getting a lower price, and delivering those next day DVDs instantly. And then we made a long-term bet on personalization. It took 10 years to prove that personalization actually improved retention, but we had some proxy metrics along the way that gave us hope. And then we just learned the simple model of our job was to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And we were learning the balancing act of delight and margin, and then building up these hard to copy advantages of brand or network effect or economies of scales. We were learning together just that simple model. And the other thing I would say is margin equals fuel. So spending those 2 years on advertising and previously viewed that gave us the operating income actually raised the stock price that gave us access to more funds to create this better future for our customers. And then I will just say that consumer science is hard. Like music is incredibly good in the context of social, right? Social is really good in books. You know, who would have thunk that in the context of movies that social wouldn't work as well? I mean, this is just, you know, this is why you have to experiment. You don't know what will work and what will not work. So I have one more pop quiz for you. Now it's 2007. And we're launching Watch Instantly in January. The word streaming didn't really exist yet. Customers didn't understand what it meant. They thought it meant streamlining, and that sounded bad. And we've just launched streaming, and 5% of our customers watch at least 15 minutes in a month. The shortest episode of TV was 15 minutes, the smallest increment of value. And by the way, this is Brent Ary's job. He was a product leader, worked for me. This was his proxy metric, the percentage of customers who watch at least 15 minutes in a month. And our theory is if we move that up into the right, it would actually improve retention, which was my job. We had those 300 streaming titles available to Steamy Romance, and we're only on a PC. And for folks who can remember, we used Silverlight as the digital rights management. It was really hard to install. I can see Sega going, oh yeah, I remember that. That sucked, right?
Yeah.
So this is the situation. Again, you've got an idea factory, and you're Brent Ary. It's your job to move this metric, the percentage of members who watch at least 15 minutes in a month. And here are the list of ideas. And what are the 2 or 3 that you are going to choose to invest in? And that's the question I put to you right now. Stephen, it turns out that some people think that getting more discs in customers' hands, you know, it's more expensive to let them watch more movies, but retention substantially improved, which means your margin got better. So that's a clear case. We're delivering customers more value, also made the business better as well. Woo! Woo! Oh, Danny, Sega, who wants to go first?
I'll go
Danny, why
first.
don't you go ahead?
Okay. So definitely binge watching. I think that's just part of our culture nowadays. I don't know people who haven't binge watched. So I would definitely go that route. And then the other 2 things I chose were launching on Mac, just to have a different platform. And then the signing Stars deal for 1,000 more titles.
Cool. Sega, do you have a diversity of thinking on this one?
Same on the first 2. Getting more titles, right? You
Yep.
want something besides steamy romance. You want to enable binge watching. And then the third one I chose was Netflix hardware to get it to the TV so that, it's actually easier to just sit there and watch more.
Got it. Good. Okay. So let's now perfect hindsight and inside knowledge. What's the answer here? Okay, let's go with surprises. So we actually spent a year to build the first Netflix player, which was a magic box that let customers watch on the TV. And 1 month from launch, we canceled it. And the reason was, first of all, we did this because we couldn't get anyone to play with us. At the time, the game systems, the big dog was the Wii, the number 2 player, these are TV connected devices, was the PlayStation, and the third was the Xbox. So we naturally focus on Xbox. Hey, you can make your service better by letting your members stream instantly via Netflix. None of these people said yes, because we were still too small, right? So we built our own box and then we killed it a month from launch because our idea was, because frankly, those 3 players, Xbox, PlayStation, and Wii, were pissed that we were contemplating building our own box because then they could never play. We would have a competitive advantage. So we killed it. Oh, there was the other reason, which is Wall Street thought we were going to become a hardware manufacturer. And they would have devalued our stock because hardware manufacturers have lower margin businesses. So this was a lot like that UK decision. 1 month from launch, we canceled. So that's a surprise to everybody here. Yeah, binge watching was cool. That was just a happy accident. Frankly, it was just us trying to create as much value as we possibly could. And then, yeah, actually launching on Mac was really important and really helpful. It turned out that the mobile devices weren't important until like 6 or 7 years later, until 2012 or 2013. Back then, people didn't want to watch on these little devices. They wanted to watch on a normal screen. And both of you, Sega and Danny, got it right. It's the content stupid. So getting those 1,000 titles was incredibly helpful to us. And then, yes, strategically, Netflix just kept pounding on that one long-term issue of personalization. So what am I hoping you'll learn from this? By the way, that Roku box was the box that Netflix built. And when we canceled it, we threw those 100 engineers out of the building. And that's the formation story for the startup called Roku. That's where Roku came from. All right, so first was that trauma where we didn't launch the box. We realized we were going to be a streaming platform, not a hardware company. And that happened. Today, every screen in the world is pre-wired. Netflix is a streaming platform, but it's not a hardware manufacturer. And then we continued the investment in personalization. And the episodic TV content, I just call that a happy accident, okay? Like a lot of these things, you don't really know the answer. And then, occasionally have a little good luck. And that's what happened there. And then we had our first original content success. This is 2013 with House of Cards. Turns out investing in TV content is better than movies at this time. Here's why. You invest and people develop a relationship with these characters and the storyline. And you can go for like 100 episodes, 120 episodes, where I joke, nobody really wants to watch Rocky 100. You can't go with movies for as long. And you got the memo on this. So these happy accidents, this is where, a lot of entrepreneurship is just chance. And this is where Reid Hoffman says an entrepreneur is someone who jumps off a cliff and assembles an airplane on the way down. And this is just the life of experimentation, and it's hard. So this story goes on. The international story, it worked out. Netflix is everywhere except, gosh, it's not in China. It's not in North Korea. It's not in Crimea, not in Syria, like just only a few places. So that expansion went exceptionally well. And now it's in the stage 4, which is around original content. And I'm sure many of you have engaged with lots of series. Sega, what's your favorite original content from Netflix?
These days, it's the Queen's Gambit.
Cool. I love that one. Yeah. But you can see just like lots of experimentation all over the world. And I'm hoping that one of your favorites. By the way, not everything worked. This is Chelsea Handler. Netflix was sort of experimenting with live TV. She would do this late night talk show, and within a few hours, it was translated into 40 languages around the world, with a delay of just a few hours. So they're experimenting with content types now as well. Not everything works. So here's the big question I want you chewing on right now. I've talked about how important it is in these long-term journeys and having a product vision. You always want to have a fuzzy vision of what's next. And so here are the 4 stages we know have gone well for Netflix. And my question I'm going to pose to you, if you were the product leader at Netflix and you're required to have a fuzzy vision of what's next in this journey, this just keeps going forever. If you're going to build a great company, you want to be thoughtful about 5 or 10 years from now, what might be the next stage of our multi-stage rocket? So what's it going to be for Netflix? And this is Sam Altman. He's the chairman of Y Combinator. That's where like Airbnb came from. Be more ambitious, then talk about that big vision and work relentlessly towards it, but always have a next step. So what is Netflix's next step? And I'm going to put it out to the collective wisdom. Kieran, Chelsea is annoying in all languages. That gave me a good laugh. Kalfana, that's a great guess. I don't know if you're using Slido, but if you can, put your guess or your fuzzy vision of the future into the word cloud here, because I'm really, really curious to hear from all of you of what you think is next for Netflix.
And we're starting to see live TV interactive content. Gib, if I'm right, I think interactive content, that's something they've experimented with in the past, right?
I'm just the guy in the background right now, Mike. I'm not going to leap on that one yet.
I just remember my kids watching some choose your own adventure-ish type programming.
Right. Well, so you're right. So if you're the product leader at Netflix, at this point, it's not clear, but you will be experimenting with multiple ideas to figure out what that next stage is. So yeah, for sure. If I were the head of product today, I'd probably have a couple of chips down. And yes, I'll show you evidence of those experiments that are in play today, right? But that's the way it's hard to be 100% confident in the next stage. So you want to have these little bit of bets or experiments down. Okay, what do you got for us? If you read, what are the big themes here, Danny, that where the people are saying what's next? What do you see? What do you see?
I'm seeing a lot of sports, a lot of live TV. I actually said live news. I think if we wanted to compete with cable companies, that's a big one, because one of the reasons that I only sign up for cable like around election season or things like that, because I want to be able to watch real time what's happening. So things like live news, definitely sports. The reason I didn't choose sports is because I feel like there's a lot of competition in that space. And I know Prime just signed a deal as well with, what was it, the NFL for exclusive rights to Thursday night games, right?
Yep.
I've gotten the Prime subscriber so that I can get those, but like, yeah, so that's why I chose the news, because I feel like that's a big reason people still have cable today is watching.
So I'll tell you something interesting, Danny. In this exercise, one thing that's kind of odd, I'm not very competitive. I don't think or worry too much about the competition, because Netflix has been very effective at building hard to copy advantage and defining their own game, right? And so the question is, what is Netflix's game and what's a logical next step, right? And I agree with, like for instance, news doesn't really feel part of their game, if you will. For me, so much about Netflix is really about entertainment, right? Are people entertained? Now, we could debate that because a lot of the documentaries are really about education and informing, which I do think is a component, okay? So I'll sort of give you my hypothesis. So Mike has seen the experiments already because he's got kids. Interactive stories, and this is the incredible Kimmy Schmidt. And an interactive story, I think it has the potential to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. Today, about 1% of customers are watching an hour a month of interactive content. And what makes this hard to copy is the tools that you create and the relationships you create with the storytellers in the ecosystem. You're essentially trying to bring these studios and storytellers onto your platform, which gives you a huge hard to copy advantage. And if this number over the next 5 or 10 years goes from 1% to 15 or 20%, you will in fact improve retention. And Danny was talking about competition. Netflix is sort of competing for screen time generally. They talk about competing with Fortnite or Instagram. They call it those magic moments where you're deciding what are you going to do next, and they want to win your attention there. And that's really, Reed Hastings once joked that the competition, he's the CEO of the company, is sleep. He's competing with sleep. Okay, which I thought was wild. So Mike, as a parent, may have seen DreamWorks Puss in Book, or he may have seen Captain Underpants' Epic Choice-O-Rama. These are existing interactive stories. The grown-ups may have seen Black Mirror's Bandersnatch. Bandersnatch actually won an Emmy, and then the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is out on interactive today as well. So I just want to tell you how I think about all these ideas together. I've shared here 5 columns of Netflix, these 5 stages. You can see it: DVD, streaming, international, originals, and maybe interactive. And I just want to acknowledge that, and what I've shared up top is the core value that Netflix has discovered. That's part of their service through the whole extension of these 5 columns, if you will. And where did those ideas came from? They came from experiments. So I'm going to share with you here all the successful experiments, the things that worked at each stage as they're discovering what their future plan, their future next stage of rocket was. And notice that the list of failures is equal to the successes. And it really points out how hard that consumer science is and how much you do have to engage in that experimental process. You have a plan, you have a long-term product vision, you have a strategy, and then you run into the reality of consumers. And then all along the way, it's that culture, just the culture of being open to experimentation, of having the courage to dare with new ideas, or having intellectual curiosity to guess the next thing. These are the things that are critical in predicting the future. And then the next thing I do with this model is I'm always thinking about how much should you be investing in each stage. So in 2010, Netflix invested 20% in its DVD by mail, and 30% in streaming, and 40% in international, and only 10% in originals. They didn't know if that was worthy yet. And then look at it today. 5% for the few million engaged in DVDs, 30% invested in streaming, 30% invested in original, 30% in the international as well, and then just a little speculative 5% experimentation in interactive stories. And so this is how you can apply that same model to think, if you're the product leader, how much do I want to invest in these different things? And this is how I think about experimenting 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. So I want to bring things home as I encourage you to think about your rocket ship, the company that you're with today. And I'm going to bring it back to those 3 forces: the strategy, the plan, and I've shared with you the GLEe model today for crafting a long-term product vision. And I've shared with you the model of delighting customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And the key thing in these cultures where experimentation is king, say the sentence: my hypothesis is that news will work because we're about educating, informing, having these ideas and hypotheses. And then the consumer science, this is where you get the data to learn what works and what doesn't. This customer obsession is being maniacally focused on how can you serve your customer. But just acknowledging fast-paced experimentation, that's how you really learn. And you're always trying to make the core of your service better, the capsule of that rocket. And then you're always beginning to experiment. What is our next step function? And the last thing is the role of culture in helping the organization to develop judgment. Because few employees are there for 20 or 30 years when you're trying to build these great companies. In the culture of Netflix, it's all about curiosity, of courage, of candor. And you need different kinds of experts at each stage. Netflix needed a DVD by mail operations expert. His name was Tom Dillon in the early days. And he used to joke with me that the website wasn't important. I'm like, Tom, when we go streaming, your job ain't important. And that is exactly what happened. And this is also why you need iconoclasts. Those people are always challenging and understanding that the stuff that got us here ain't gonna get us there. And so that the need for different employees and expertise at each stage of the way. So I'm going to bring it home. There's really just one last idea that's critically important. This is Reed Hastings. He's the CEO of Netflix. And that last idea is patience. So if you look, this is the market cap of Netflix today. It's worth about $225 billion. But for so many years, it was worth next to zero, right? But through the experimentation and the learning and growth, slowly over the course of 20 years, it finally has created real value. It takes a long time to learn this stuff, to experiment, to discover what works and doesn't. With that, I'll bring it home with Sega's favorite movie at the time, The Queen's Gambit. I want to say thank you. We'll talk about this in a moment. But this is the awkward moment where I'm like a street performer doing my thing. I'm about to pass the hat, but I'm not asking you for money. If you hold up your phone, and Mike's doing some link bombs right now, as though you're taking a picture, this QR code will activate a SurveyMonkey thing. 0 is bad, 10 is great. Choose whatever number you like. And if you could give me one idea that you liked about this and one idea about how to make it better, this is my consumer science. This is my 670th SurveyMonkey link. And just thanking you in advance for giving me this feedback, because it's incredibly helpful. This is the same exact QR code on the left, and on the right, I'm just letting you know that the PDF is sitting waiting for you at gibsonbiddle.com / I can't quite read it, prod collect or whatever it says. That's correct. I put some other links to a Medium series I did on product strategy. The PDF is waiting for you. Also a link to get some X% off for Mike's big event in April. He'll tell you all about that as well. And with that, I'll say thank you. Hey, Mike, thanks for hosting me. Danny and Sega, you guys were awesome. I hope I didn't freak you out too much, but you added to the conversation, so I appreciate that. Thanks, especially Madrid, for being with